Persistent window cleaners should have just left me alone. This was years ago, but another story I read reminded me of it. TLDR, window cleaners wouldn't take no for an answer and as a result, get done for having a flat tire and no vehicle tax. When I was about 14 years old, I was left at home on my own for the first time. This was a chance to prove to my parents that I was responsible enough to be left alone. Both my parents were at work. Mom was an accountant, Dad was a police officer. That is relevant. I was told not to open the door to anyone. After a few hours, there's a knock on the door. I ignore it. They keep knocking. It's clear I'm in the house as you can see someone in the living room from the front door. They keep knocking so I open the door to get rid of them. There are two men standing there. They tell me they are window cleaners and they'll clean the windows for a fee. I said no thanks. They persist, but I still say no. I close the door and think that's the end of it. 2 minutes later, they're cleaning the front windows. I go out and say I already told them I don't want the windows cleaned and I can't pay them. They're cheerful enough. Don't worry, love, we'll leave a bill. You can pay it later. I'm getting quite anxious now, so I firmly as a scared 14-year-old can, tell them to go away. A few minutes later, I hear some noise around the back. I open the back door, which is right next to the gate to the back garden. One of them is trying to climb the fence to unlock it. Now I'm panicking. Deep down I know they're just trying to clean the windows, but I don't like that they've ignored me and they're be so persistent. I yell at them to go away, but all I get was "Don't worry, love, we do this all the time." But I have a secret weapon. I whistle and my rather large German Shepherd dog comes to my side. Usually she wouldn't bark, but she knew I wasn't happy with these guys. She goes crazy. They ask me to put the dog away. Obviously I refuse, and they finally get the message. I'm pretty shook up, so I call my mom to tell her what happened. Mom calls Dad. Dad turns up in the marked car and talks to the window cleaners. I don't hear the conversation, but apparently it went something like this. Dad, we've had a report that you've harassed a young girl and tried to gain access to the back garden when told not to. Them, no mate, that's not what happened. She's making it up. Dad, so, you're saying my daughter is a liar. The penny drops. Anyway, turns out the van they were driving had a flat tire and the tax had expired, so Dad fined them for that.
Airbnb host denies my request for 10% partial refund? Fine. It'll just take 30% instead. Recently I stayed at an Airbnb. Around 10 p.m. the day we checked it, I noticed the hot water wasn't working. I reached out to the host, who was responsive and said maintenance would be there 8 a.m. the next morning, which they were. Pretty annoying, but at least it'll be fixed promptly. Well, after a long 10-hour day of hiking and getting really dirty, I was ready for a nice shower. Surprise, surprise, when I get back the hot water still isn't working. Everything else about the place was amazing and luxurious, and the host was really responsive, so I thought I'd give him a chance to work things out without involving Airbnb. I asked for a partial refund since we did not have hot water for our entire 2-night stay. He said the best he could do is 10% off of a future stay. I told him it should be applied to this stay, and he said they are not able to apply it to this stay. The fact that he said not able did not sit well with me. I contacted Airbnb support and within a few hours was granted a 30% refund for the entire trip. Honestly, I would have been okay with a 10% discount, but it makes me feel good knowing that he lost his chance to do 10% and now has to do 30%.
Break into my locker? Get the prize you deserve. This happened years ago when I was in middle school, but I thought it was perfect here. The school I attended gave every student a locker, but the student had to provide their own locks for them. It's teenagers and they get very rowdy moving from class to class, so the locks were really important in trying to prevent them from getting in, you know, like what it's supposed to do. The way you got your locker was by order of last names in your homeroom, so a whole row would be dedicated to one class. This is a little important for later. In the mornings, my friends and I would hang out by my locker because it was in a larger section of students, so we could talk to everyone coming in the morning. Near the end of the year, I started bringing snacks like donuts or candy to share with them and would put the rest in my locker for later. At the time I had a really nice, higher-end lock for the locker, so it was pretty hard to try and get it off without the original combo, so I thought I wouldn't have anything to worry about. Cut to a class after lunch. A group of guys comes in late to class and they all had packets of mayo they were throwing away while laughing like crazy. I could only hear something about a lock before they had dispersed. I get to my locker at the end of the day and it is dripping in mayo. There was more mayo than lock. In an attempt to save I put in a bag to take home and clean. It ended up pretty ruined, and since the end of the year was rolling around I thought I would be fine not having one for a couple weeks. Next day, I come in and put my stuff away and put my lunch on shelf in the locker before going about my day. I come back hours later to find the food that I had been taken, eaten, and thrown all over the hall. I'm pissed at this point because the group of guys that had the mayo happened to have a guy in my homeroom with name right before mine, and he always got to see what I was putting in there. I went home and found an old cheap lock and brought it in hopes of stopping that from happening again. Nope, they broke it off and ransacked it again. I tried another, same outcome. I even tried just a shoelace to see if they'd maybe leave it alone. Again, ransacked, and the shoelace was tied on the guy's lock. So now I'm pissed, and the school wouldn't do anything after I reported it, so I had to get creative. I knew they always went for what was most front and center and would always go in if they saw I had brought my lunch or snacks. The solution? Ghost pepper hot sauce covered jelly beans. I bought 2 jars for Dr. Pepper flavored jelly beans and soaked 1 jar in the hot sauce. The next morning, I made a big deal about finding these in a really cool candy store and went so far and to offer the group of guys some of the normal ones before putting it in the locker where they could see in. I swapped the jar of normal ones with the hot sauce ones and left them to do their thing. I ended up leaving class early to go to the bathroom before lunch and found half-chewed jelly beans all over the hallway. They never said anything and never touched my shit ever again. College roommate got a taste of her own medicine. Been spending a lot of time in this subreddit, so I wanted to share my story from many years ago. So back when I was a junior in college, I shared an apartment with 3 other girls. One of the girls was very difficult to live with. She frequently had sex on our living room couch, which is fine, but wouldn't warn anyone. I'd get up in the middle of the night to get a glass of water and frequently walked in on her. I'm a night owl, which she knew, so some warning would have been nice. She also gave access to our apartment to her friends, who none of us knew. The TV in the living room was brought by me, and I'd frequently get back from class wanting to relax and watch TV. However, I almost never could use my TV as every time I came home, she'd have a random friend over. Meanwhile, she wasn't there, and her friend would be playing video games on the TV for hours on end. To continue the saga, she would take showers that lasted hours long, and she would always end up flooding the bathroom. She never contributed to cleaning and was always clogging the drain, so the bathroom flooding happened regularly. I could barely use the bathroom. I had to be cautious walking through the living room, and I never had access to the TV I brought. As I mentioned, she never contributed to cleaning. Whenever she would cook, the dishes would pile up. She had a thing where, say, a recipe called for 2 tablespoons of an ingredient, she had to use a separate individual spoon for each tablespoon required. This led to the sink being piled with her dishes after just one meal, and it would get to the point where we couldn't even run the faucet to wash our hands. Now, before each break, our apartment had to be spotless as someone would come check and we could get fined. At my school, you stayed on campus all 4 years, so this was a dorm residence with rules by the school. During fall break, Thanksgiving break, and winter break, I was last to leave and was always left with the chores of cleaning up this roommate's mess. Everyone else cleaned their stuff up and never caused any issues. By the time spring break came along, I had had enough. Once again, I was the last one to leave the apartment, so it was on me to do the final cleaning. The sink was once again filled with all of her dishes, and she had already gone home for break. I decided I wasn't going to clean up her mess again. So instead, I took all of her dirty dishes and placed them on her desk and bed. I left a post-it note saying, "If you don't want this to happen again, clean up after yourself." There were so many other awful things she did to us, but the messiness and lack of cleaning was the one thing that pissed me off the most. I was done with cleaning up after her, and if anyone were to get in trouble for the mess, it should be her. So I thought it was only fair all her dirty dishes ended up as a pile on all of her stuff. I never saw her reaction, and she didn't speak to any of us after that or spend time in the apartment. I never had to deal with cleaning up after her again, so it felt like a win to me.
Enjoy the nuts. Years ago, I worked at a VA hospital for a doctor who was a tightwad. It was a busy practice, and I kept a can of nuts on my desk to tide me over if I missed lunch. I noticed the nuts seemed to be disappearing at a faster rate than expected, so I started storing them in my desk drawer. That was no deterrent to the nut thief. The last straw was when a new can of nuts was opened and eaten out of, despite being stored in my drawer. It was an old desk, no key available. I soaked 13 nuts in bitter apple spray, the kind you use to stop a dog from unwanted chewing. After allowing them to dry, I placed them in a can in the drawer, removed the new can, and waited. The next morning there were 12.5 nuts in the can. The jerk spit out half a nut and put it back. Not a word was said, but my food stopped disappearing.
had my manager fired. Few years ago, I was hired by a small business company. Nobody wanted the job. My profile fitted perfectly with their needs. I sensed that they were desperately searching for somebody and negotiated a good salary. My manager was friendly but also very bad at his job. I'm a good seller and a fast learner. He left me totally alone since day 3. He literally left the whole shop in my hands after working less than 1 hour per day and came back just to close the shop. At some point, 1 month later, he didn't even bother to come back at the end of our shift. After 2 months I was doing my job plus his job that included also online customer care. So I was selling and managing the whole shop, plus answering the phone and handling online shop customers care. One day I answered to a customer that had sent an email addressed to my manager after he told me to do it. My answer was too good to be true, so he got envious and decided that he had to find something wrong in it to make me pay. He called me ignorant and said very racist things to me. His absence at work started to gain other coworkers' attention. We were overwhelmed and tired and had no way to take days off because he was never there. So I teamed up with 2 other colleagues and we filed an official complaint to the owners. We gathered proofs of his bad behavior for 1 month. I finally had a team meeting with the owners and told them about how racist the manager had been with me. After that, a week later, they finally fired him. They also found out he was stealing from them. He had worked there for 10 years. The health teacher and the used tampons. I've long since graduated high school, but reminiscing with friends reminded me of this beautiful petty revenge. I'd transferred schools just in time for sophomore year. My first school was awful, knife fights in middle school, teachers throwing books at students, etc., but had a pretty comprehensive sex ed class. I had kids who tried to fluster the teacher in my class, but the man answered their questions with grace. We even covered LGBT+ topics. We only needed 1/2 year of both health and PE. You could take a half of both, or do a split year. MWF was health and 2th was PE. I took it freshman year. My second school, while much better overall, had an atrocious sex ed class. I didn't know until my senior year that my second school required another 1/2 year from me, so I got that out of the way first semester. Mr. H.L., we'll call him, was vaguely sexist and was always pitting the boys and girls against each other. He also never let girls go to the bathroom during his class unless it was period related, in which you'd have to announce it to convince him to let you go. One girl bled through her pants because she was too embarrassed to ask. This pissed teenage me off royally, so I decided to nip it in the bud. When I asked to use the restroom, I'd hold up a pad or tampon while loudly asking, making sure it was clear to everyone. It wasn't actually my time. I was just indignant. I'd disappear for a while, then come back with the wrapper and throw it away in the trash can by his desk. Everyone was quiet for a moment before the usual immature laughter burst out. I got detention, but it was worth it. I didn't stop. This launched other girls in the class into doing the same. Except they didn't know mine wasn't used. Other classes started doing it who were fed up with Mr. H not taking their period needs seriously. Before long, the classroom started reeking. Some of the boys complained. Others were on board with the protest and found it hilarious. He tried telling people not to throw them away in his class, but we just got creative with it. Tampons hidden in soda cans, pads smoothed in stacks of papers. It got bad. Mr. H finally relented, pleading with everyone to stop. We could finally go to the bathroom again, without having to make a scene.
Revenge on the Aussie neighbor. First time posting here. This is not my story, but it's funny and worth posting on this sub. My friend, let's call him Jared, 27, the biggest Chad in the squad. He is the most carefree and unhinged person I have ever met. Jared has a friend, let's call him Adam. Adam's girlfriend cheated on him with Jared's neighbor, the type of blokey Aussie neighbor who owns a Hilux UTE. Devastated and saddened by the news, Jared took Adam out for a drink and later went to KFC and had a family feast. They had a big night out. At 2 a.m. the boys walked back home from KFC. Jared needed to check a massive shit and he was only 1 minute away from his house. But wait a minute, he had to walk past the Aussie guy's house. Jared took the matter into his own hands and decided to avenge his best mate. Jared proceeded to climb onto the back of the Hilux, pulled down his pants and began to splatter the UTE with his stool, Oppenheimer style. He was spreading his love in the UTE for a solid 10 minutes. That UTE was covered with digested KFC family feast. Jared hopped out of the Hilux and walked with his legs apart with pride and joy while giving Adam a bro fist, and they ended the night with joy and laughter. The next morning Jared was woken up by his Aussie neighbor screaming "What the FK?" and witnessed the Aussie man tragically clean his Hilux with a high-pressure water hose with a disgusted look on his face. Jared happily went back to sleep.
My PE teacher thinks that he knows everything about periods, so now I know everything about him. My BF, trans male, was on his period, so he asked if he could leave to use the bathroom during class. My BF gets really heavy flow on the first few days of his period and really bad cramps, so naturally he takes a while in the bathroom. My BF took about 10 to 15 minutes to get back. However, when he got back, my P.E teacher ridiculed him for taking too long at the bathroom. This was in front of the entire class, by the way. My BF had to explain to my teacher that he was on his period and that he takes a bit longer to use the bathroom on those days. Seems like a pretty reasonable response, right? Wrong. My teacher then went off on a rant about how that was no excuse and that he has 3 sisters and none of them take that long. My BF is very shy and tends to shut down when he's yelled at in front of a lot of people. I, being very protective of the people I love, stepped in and gave my BF a hug while trying to explain to me teacher that all periods are different and that his sisters likely use tampons. I also tried to tell him that just because he has 3 sisters doesn't mean that he knows everything about periods. Another one of the girls in my class also reminded my teacher that my BF was only gone for 10 to 15 minutes, which isn't even that long of a time to use the bathroom. At this point, my teacher was turning red. My BF was crying at this point. So I said to my teacher this: the next time you decide to talk about things that you know nothing about, don't do it in front of the entire class. What bewilders me even more is that my P.E teacher also teaches my health class. I tried talking to my school coordinator about it, but they said Mr. Insert P.E teacher's name is allowed to have his own opinions. Beyond stupid, but at that point I knew that none of the other teachers would help me. Fast forward a few days and my P.E teacher is away from school because he got a cold. He was gone for about 4 days. In those 4 days, I got an idea. When he got back, I would ask him why he was away from school. When he says that he had a cold, I would say to him, well, I have a brother and he doesn't take that long to recover from a cold. I knew full well that I was going to get in trouble, but it was worth it. Nobody makes my BF cry on my watch. On the day my P.E teacher got back, my plan was going to go into action. When he said that all bodies recover from sicknesses at their own rate, so I said to him, oh, but the same can't be said about periods, right? At that moment he realized what I was doing. He kept quiet because he knew that he had no arguments left. It felt so good, LMAO. But it doesn't end there. I decided that every time that he does something, I will say, well, my brother has blank and he doesn't do blank. It drives him insane and I don't plan on stopping until he apologizes. I know it's petty, but that's kind of the point of this subreddit, LMAO.
Pushy guy at the self-checkout. First time posting here, not sure it fits, but here goes. About a month ago, I was at the self-checkout at Walmart on like a Tuesday weekday, mid-month, not very busy. I like to use self-checkout, the scan and go, not the 10 items or less one, so I can bag my stuff the way I want it. I put like items together, freezer stuff, cans, bags for the snack pantry, etc. Makes it easier to put away. I have 3 teenagers, so it's a lot of stuff, usually $200 to $300 worth, but I've got a system and routine, and I enjoy it. On this day, a party of 4 adults came up behind me, about 3 bags in my checkout. The 3 women walked on outside and the man of the group unloaded their cart on the belt next to mine, and this pushy guy actually moved some of my stuff and stacked it up more, pushed and knocked some stuff over to make room for his stuff on the belt thing. Bro, this annoyed me, but I was still just cruising through, doing my thing, until he came up next to me where the scanner is and got in my space, kept inching closer and closer, huffing and puffing. I'd glance over at him and I could tell he was reading the price of everything I scanned like he was the one paying for it. He was literally so close. When I bent down to put stuff in a bag and raised back up, I bumped into him. So, I went in slow motion. I took my time turning things over to find the barcode. Every single thing I bought from here out was arranged in the bags perfectly, spaciously double bagged and tied. Then, arranged in the cart perfectly. Every time I went to tie a bag, then double bag it, he'd shuffle from one foot to the other or sigh dramatically. He gave meaning to the phrase breathing down my neck. Then it was time to pay. I planned to pay with my debit card, but I had a bunch of gift cards saved from contests at work, ranging from $10 to $25. I paid for my entire $312 order with gift cards. After the 4-5th gift card, I heard him mutter, "Are you fucking kidding me?" I took my time, gathered my receipt and put my wallet away before moving myself and my cart so he could start to check out. I'm pretty sure his blood pressure skyrocketed to some unhealthy numbers, but man, was it satisfying. Steal from me, now I steal my money back from you. Years ago, it was myself and a roommate, both males, living in a small house. We were both dating and our respective partners, both females, who were also living with us. Rent was to be split 4 ways because that's fair for everybody. For the sake of this story, here are the names to help keep everyone on track. Then we will proceed. Me roommate Cow, roommates GF, my partner at the time, AB, annoying baby from the cow. My GF and I were both in our final stages, 2 years left, of college, going to school full-time and working 30-plus hours a week. My roommate worked full-time and the cow did absolutely nothing to contribute to society and stayed home all day with her baby and smoked all day. Our home was outfitted with loads of security cameras that would record everything, and after 7 days it would delete. The security system setup was in my room and I was the only one who knew how to operate it. We lived in a decent neighborhood but still had issues with crime. My frustrations began when I would come home from working and going to school and trying to study late at night, while AB would scream and cry throughout all hours of the night, making it quite challenging for me to stay sane. We also had issues of our vehicles being broken into and vandalized. One day when I was going through the security cameras, I noticed the cow and this random guy going through my GFS car and taking things from her purse. This bit at H was unlocking our cars and stealing our stuff in the driveway. She never came clean, and even though I told my roommate and showed him footage, we never got anything back. Had to get new licenses, card numbers, etc. A few weeks go by and my GF and I begin taking our belongings out of our cars and putting them in our room. Things would just randomly disappear: money, jewelry, valuable etc. But nobody would be home except for the cow when these things magically wandered off. My GF and I had been pushed to our breaking point after 3 to 4 months, and we could see this cow was the root of the problems. While everyone else was away, her and this sketchy random guy would be stealing from right under our noses. Cops could never do anything because since she was also renting and allowed this guy into the home, there were no cameras inside and therefore no proof it was either of them. On the day my GF and I moved out, I was so ticked off and mad that I went into the cow's room she had left somewhere. I made sure to cut all the cameras so nothing could be traced. I ended up finding some pieces of the taken jewelry, about $2,000 worth of cash, my GF's missing wallet, and I'm not proud, but this set me off, now having found all the evidence. So what any calculated person would do, instead of simply taking it, I ransacked this cow's room, yanked drawers out, threw clothes everywhere, flipped the mattress and broke her lampshade. Then I cluttered up the living room and my GF and I just walked out of the house, leaving both front and back doors wide open so that it looked like a robbery. Later that evening we get a call from the police that they want to question us. We come down. The cow is furious and uncontrollable, yelling it was us and she knows it was ECT, but we politely tell the officer that we no longer live there. They are welcome to check our wallets, but it wasn't us, and we've actually had numerous issues before at this address if they would like to check the various complaints we had filed. I said since we no longer lived there to ask the girl if by chance she left the house unlocked, which she did, and I informed the officer maybe someone broke in. Wait, we used to live here and there's actually a security system and cameras. Maybe they can ask the moo F-tard cow to show them the cameras. Obviously she couldn't and didn't know how to work anything. They come back out and ask me if I can work it, so I'm escorted into the home. I tinker with it, make it look like it's not super easy, and then let them know that there's nothing. Someone must have cut the power off or something after we left. I can turn it on, but nothing was recorded. Unfortunately, the officers thanked us for our time, chalked it up to breaking and entering with no suspects, and nothing more was ever heard from the cow, and we went on to have peaceful living arrangements elsewhere.
The case of the missing vowels. This happened a long time ago in a project far, far away. I was put on an IT development project where the company I worked for was subcontracted by the lead contractor. We had a wonderful project manager, but because the lead contractor had executives who didn't know how to work with the end government client, things went off the rails. Of course they blamed our much beloved and very competent PM, so he was replaced, of course, by the least competent alternative they could find this side of Tatooine. This guy did not know anything about IT. It was a development project. The company I worked for adhered to the philosophy that any good project manager can manage any type of project. Perhaps that is true, but he was not a good PM. He yelled at people, flew off the handle, and made bad assumptions based on his poor grasp of technology. He was always giving our poor IT support trouble because he couldn't use basic office tech very well, even email. I suspect he was very aware of being out of his depth and took it out on everyone, every day. I was about to start typing a short email report to send him one Friday afternoon, but I decided the better of it. He would usually run to my desk and demand explanations for things that were to my mind simple. Rarely were any interactions pleasant. It had been a long week, but I mistakenly clicked send and sent a blank message. Well, true to form, he ran to my desk asking why I had sent a blank message. In that moment, I had an inspiration. I said I hadn't sent him a message. I had the presence of mind to delete the message from my sent folder when I heard him bustling towards me, so showed him my sent folder. I suggested it was his email. He bustled off to log another ticket with IT, thus commenced my campaign. Every Friday afternoon I sent a blank message at exactly the same time. Everyone on the team was soon aware of it and had to stifle themselves when he would go on about his email problems at project meetings. I think a few other people would send blank messages once in a while to keep him from thinking this was solely me, and just to wind him up even more. The project was finally winding down after many months of mismanagement by the lead contractor and this PM. I had to type up another short email report. I let the rest of the team know the endgame plan. When I had finished writing it up, I carefully made 3 copies. From one I subtracted all the vowels. From another I removed all the consonants. I sent the vowel-less one at the appointed time, followed quickly by the one sans consonants. I then deleted them from my sent folder and moved the properly formatted one into my sent. Just in time, because he made beeline for my desk. The email you sent is gibberish. What do you mean? It makes no sense. I showed him what was in my sent. But we went to his desk and he showed me the email with no vowels. He hadn't seen the second one with no consonants, so I watched him open it. Would you look at that? The vowels came after the consonants. Maybe something is wrong with your email, or you have a virus separating them? On cue, he opens a panic ticket. I went back to my desk. A little while later, the woman who ran our team's IT support walked up to my desk and punched me in the shoulder. Ow, what was that for? That was very funny. Don't do it again. Apparently, the story of the virus that disemboweled the project manager still circulates at the company many years after I left.
Throw eggs at my car. Have fun washing and waxing for hours. For a couple of weeks since school started, 2 neighborhood middle school kids, they are brothers, have been messing with my brother, also middle school aged, at school, on the bus, and in the neighborhood. Nothing very serious, but super annoying things like taking his backpack on the bus, calling him names, and taking his toys at the neighborhood pool. He told me, college-aged, about it and asked me to help, so the next time they came along while we were at the pool I chewed them out for a few minutes and they damn near shitted themselves. That seemed to fix it for a few days, after which I became their target. Now they didn't really mess with me directly, but instead my car. With my parents' help, I recently bought a 2021 Toyota Camry TRD V6. I have a much older car too from high school, gift from dad, but this one is really my pride and joy. Ask any of my neighbors and they'll know how much I love it. I wash it pretty much every weekend, lol. Now just yesterday when I was almost done applying a coat of wax, I ran inside to grab a glass of water. It's 97 degrees here in Atlanta SMH. I walk out to the driveway to see those MFS running away with an empty carton of eggs and my goddamn car covered in yolks and eggshells. I lose my shit and yell some nasty words at them. Not only had I washed it, but I had also waxed it this weekend, and that shit takes hours to do for a really clean finish. Luckily, I didn't notice any paint damage. Now I promptly drive my egg-covered car to those kids' parents' house and knock. I explain to the dad WTF just happened and the whole background. These people have been more hostile than friendly in the past, but the dad looked pissed at what happened and he noticed how fucked my car was. Now this dude is a linebacker-sized Marine veteran. He instantly called his older kid and yelled at him to bring both of their asses home right now. ATP, the dad is profusely apologizing for his kid's behavior, and a few minutes later they show up. This man has the voice of a drill sergeant and he brought tears to his kids' faces in seconds. Made them do push-ups and shit right there outside LMFAO with both of us watching. After that, he asks me to go home and they'll be over in a few minutes to clean up my car. All 3 of them come over and I command those brats to rinse and wash and dry and everything. The whole time the dad stood right there pointing out his kids' mistakes. We did that for hours until my car was spotless and shiny as a diamond. Before they left, he made his kids apologize again for what they did. Even though it was a massive inconvenience on my Saturday, I still feel like it's a W since I know those slimy chimps will never mess with me or my family again.